My friend Pavel went through a divorce after almost 20 years of marriage. It happens. The thing is, Pavel is an unusually decent guy. When they separated, he left everything to his ex-wife and their adult daughter. Everything they had built during those years together. He walked away with just one suitcase. Well, one suitcase and his old cat, Kesha. Like something straight out of a fairy tale about a man and his cat. For about a year, Pavel lived alone. Didn't even look at women. You could say he was recovering from the shock. But as summer approached, his wounded heart finally began to thaw. He even created a profile on a dating website. That's where he met a woman named Yulia, a dyed blonde. Though, if we're being honest, judging by her looks and accent, her real name was probably something like Yulgiza or Gulchate, a typical daughter of the East. But Slavs are pretty tolerant people. We don't really care where someone is from. Black hair, yellow hair, whatever, as long as the person is good. So Pavel and Yulia started seeing each other, quite seriously. They didn't talk about marriage or anything like that, but after about a week of cafes and movies, she had already begun staying overnight at Pavel's small rented bachelor apartment. Everything seemed fine, except for one thing. She was terrified of Pavel's cat. Kesha followed her everywhere, step for step, as if he were watching her. He wouldn't leave her alone for a second. He even tried to get into the bathroom when she went in, and when Pavel and Yulia got into bed, the cat immediately jumped up with them. Not politely at the edge of the bed, no. He always tried to squeeze himself directly between them. This behavior made Yulia extremely uncomfortable. One night, Pavel almost developed a stutter after waking up to a piercing scream. Yulia was hysterical. Once she calmed down a little, she explained what had happened. She said she woke up because she suddenly couldn't breathe. Something heavy was pressing on her chest. When she opened her eyes, right in front of her face, she saw a terrifying animal muzzle with wide, bulging eyes and bare teeth. She screamed in absolute panic. But of course, it was just Kesha. The cat had climbed onto her chest. He used to do the same thing to Pavel all the time. Nothing unusual. But Yulia was terrified. She kept saying the cat felt unbelievably heavy, like a stone pressing down on her ribs. And those eyes, staring directly into hers. To be fair, Kesha really did seem obsessed with getting close to her face and looking straight into her eyes, day or night. Whether because of the cat or something else. 2 weeks later, Yulia disappeared from Pavel's life. She simply stopped coming over. Then she stopped answering his calls. Pavel didn't chase after her. If people split up, they split up. No big loss. But soon, something worse happened. Kesha got sick. The cat who used to devour food like a tiger suddenly stopped eating. He would walk up to his bowl, sniff the food, then slowly return to lie down in a corner. Pavel tried everything, even bought the most expensive food he could find. Kesha would nibble a crumb or two and look at him with guilty eyes, then lie down again. The poor animal was fading away. He became thin, like a skeleton, but his stomach, strangely, looked swollen, almost like there was a ball inside. Pavel took him to several veterinarians. First, they prescribed pills and powders, Then eventually, they said the same thing. The cat should be put to sleep. Kesha was already barely walking. He staggered around, weak and exhausted. Pavel was devastated. 15 years together. Losing a friend like that. He refused the vet's advice completely. Instead, he asked a friend for help. The friend had a relative who treated illnesses using unconventional methods. In simpler terms, magic. The woman explained to Pavel what he needed to do to save the cat. For some reason, she refused to perform the ritual herself, even though Pavel was ready to pay. So he did it himself. Later, he accidentally told me what he had done, even though the healer strictly forbade him to speak about it. And believe it or not, Kesha recovered. At first slowly, then rapidly. He started eating again, even more than before. The hard lump in his stomach, which had been the size of a large fist, began to shrink. Soon it disappeared completely. Within a couple of weeks, the cat regained weight, even some fat. His fur became shiny again. His round, satisfied face returned. Life for both bachelors returned to normal. Pavel completely forgot about his brief romance with Yulia. He became comfortable using dating websites. From time to time, he met different women who were looking for romance and adventure online. One evening, after some champagne and a pleasant night together, one of these women told Pavel a strange story about her friend. Her friend's name was Yulia. She said, Yulia's father became seriously ill. Doctors couldn't help him. By the time they finally diagnosed the disease, it was already stage 4. His entire body was falling apart. But in their large Tatar family, there was an old grandmother who supposedly knew magic. So Yulia and her mother went to her as a last hope. No one knows exactly what the old woman told them, but the idea was simple. The illness had to be transferred to another man, preferably someone from a different faith. So Yulia met some fool on a dating website. She did exactly what the grandmother instructed. She had to spend several nights at his apartment while performing the ritual. And once it was complete, she broke up with him. The woman laughed. Of course, nobody really believed it would work. But when people are desperate, they believe anything. And then a miracle happened. Yulia's father started recovering. No one could explain it. Maybe it was the magic. Maybe his body somehow fought the illness. But it didn't matter. He got better quickly. He was already making plans again, talking about finishing his summer house and going fishing. She paused. But 3 weeks later, the illness returned, 3 times stronger. Yulia's father died. Pavel listened carefully. Then he asked quietly, "And what happened to that guy from the website?" "Who knows?" The woman shrugged. "Yulia never saw him again. She deleted all his contacts." Pavel thought for a moment. Then he asked, "Do you have a photo of her?" "Of course. Here." She handed him her phone. From the screen smiled a familiar face. The same cheekbones, the same dyed blonde hair. It was Yulia. Of course, Pavel didn't tell the woman anything. But from that moment, he looked at his brief relationship with Yulia very differently. And he looked differently at his old cat Kesha, who somehow, without hesitation, took the entire blow of that dark ritual upon himself. And people say animals only act on instinct. This strange and not entirely understandable story happened to my older acquaintance, Leonid. We knew each other through work. At the time we met, Leonid was serving as a major in a military unit in the city of Nizhny Tagil. His military career had been going very well. He was trusted with responsible and profitable positions. People relied on him. And that was despite the fact that Leonid was rarely sober. Still, he clearly knew his job well and managed to stay on good terms with his superiors. But the lucky streak in the successful officer's life eventually came to an end. The winds of perestroika began to blow through the country. Military conversion, disarmament. Across the entire Soviet Union, military units were being disbanded. Officers were either sent into retirement or forced to find work in civilian life. Leonid's garrison was no exception. By that time, he had already reached the rank of lieutenant colonel and had become the second in command of his unit. But the unit was dissolved. The barracks and equipment were abandoned and left to be looted by locals. Leonid was simply demobilized. No ceremony, no farewell. Just like that, his military career was over. Through some acquaintances, he managed to get a job at a commercial company, but things there were unstable. Money was scarce, and at home he had a wife and 2 grown sons to support. The older one was about to be drafted into the army, but that didn't solve their financial problems. So the family decided to sell the small garden plot that belonged to Leonid's parents. The elderly couple could no longer take care of it anyway. Age and illness had taken their toll. Leonid and his wife had neither the time nor the habit of working the land. So they put the property up for sale. Before selling it, Leonid decided to go through the old garden house and see if there was anything valuable worth keeping. One weekend, he climbed into the attic. Among piles of useless junk, he discovered something unusual. An old wall clock. A cuckoo clock. It had a chain with a hanging weight and a beautifully carved wooden body shaped like a little forest cabin, decorated with tiny birds and animals. It was a fascinating object, and clearly very old, almost an antique. Leonid, despite being a military man, had an appreciation for beautiful things. So instead of leaving the clock to gather dust in the attic, he brought it home. Leonid's father later said he remembered seeing those exact same clocks when he was a child in his grandfather's house back in their village. When Leonid tested the mechanism, he was surprised. The clock still worked. He hung it on the kitchen wall so the ticking wouldn't bother them at night. But in their small Soviet 3-room apartment, the ticking could still be heard everywhere. The clock kept perfect time. It never ran fast or slow. But there was one strange thing. The cuckoo never came out. It never called the hours. The little bird just sat silently behind its tiny door. Leonid even opened the door to check. The bird was there. They took the clock to several repair shops, but every clockmaker said the same thing. They couldn't find the necessary parts to fix the cuckoo mechanism. So the clock remained on the kitchen wall, ticking, but silent. About a year after they sold the garden house, the cuckoo suddenly came back to life. One night, deep in the darkness, a metallic scraping sound echoed from the kitchen. Then a hollow call filled the apartment. Cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo. At first, Leonid couldn't understand what the strange sound was. Half asleep, the call sounded more like a ghostly ooh than a cuckoo. But soon the noise stopped. Leonid got out of bed and walked to the kitchen. He was also a heavy smoker and figured he might as well light a cigarette. When he entered the kitchen, everything became clear. The cuckoo had fully come out of its little door, and it was frozen there, silent. Leonid walked closer and looked at the bird. Well, looks like you can cuckoo when you feel like it. He grabbed the chain to pull up the weight, and suddenly froze. The cuckoo suddenly shouted again, "Cuckoo!" Then, with a metallic grinding sound, it snapped back behind the door, which slammed shut. Well, Leonid thought, looks like the clock finally fixed itself. Now we'll hear the cuckoo every hour. But an hour passed, then 2, then morning came. The cuckoo never appeared again. The next day, terrible news arrived. A telegram came from a distant city called Kandalaksha, where Leonid's older son had been serving in the army. The telegram expressed condolences. His son had died in a tragic accident. No parent should ever have to experience something like that. After that, Leonid began drinking even more. I once ran into him on the street and was shocked by how much he had aged. I offered to take him to the gym with me. My friend owned the place and would let him train for free. Leonid refused. He joked that he already did exercise every morning. In bed, he said. After that, we rarely saw each other, but about a year later we met again. I casually asked him, "So, how are those old cuckoo clocks of yours? Still ticking?" Leonid told me what had happened since then. His wife had left him. She took their younger son Sasha with her. Leonid now lived in the empty apartment with his elderly parents. But the strangest part came later. One night, in complete silence, the kitchen clock suddenly began making that same metallic scraping sound. Then the cuckoo started calling again. There were no mobile phones back then. Leonid, with shaking hands, dialed his ex-wife's number from the landline. No one answered for a long time. His heart was pounding. Please, not Sasha. Please, not Sasha. Finally, someone picked up. Hello? Nadia, is everything all right over there? Oh, it's you. Can't sleep again? Drunk, I suppose. Everything is fine here. And Sasha? Sasha is fine. He's sleeping. Don't call again. And stop drinking. Leonid felt a huge weight lift from his chest. After smoking 2 cigarettes, he went back to bed. But in the morning, his mother woke him with terrible news. Leonid, your father is dead. During the night, his father had passed away quietly in his sleep. His heart simply stopped. After the funeral, Leonid stopped drinking completely. Not even beer. Soon he found a good job at a serious manufacturing company, thanks to old friends. But he could never quit smoking. Doctors warned him that his heart was beginning to fail. Meanwhile, the cuckoo clock continued ticking perfectly. But the cuckoo remained silent again. And honestly, everyone was glad about that. A few years later, I moved away from Tagil and lost contact with Leonid. One day, I ran into a mutual acquaintance. What he told me about Leonid's fate made me realize once again how many mysteries still exist in our ordinary world. One weekend, a group of co-workers went into the forest to pick mushrooms. Leonid was with them. It was summer, hot. The forest was full of mushrooms. Leonid bent down to pick one. And suddenly he collapsed face first into the grass. 2 of his co-workers saw it happen They rushed to him, but Leonid wasn't breathing. He never regained consciousness. Later, two of his closest friends went to Leonid's apartment to tell his mother what had happened. But even before they reached the building, they saw the old woman sitting outside. She looked frightened and was staring down the road as if waiting for someone. When she saw Leonid's friends approaching, she burst into tears. They hadn't even said anything yet. She already knew. Because at the very moment her only son had collapsed in the forest, the cuckoo clock in the kitchen had suddenly started calling, loudly. The bird cried again and again, terrifying the old woman. It kept calling until the chain with the heavy weight tore loose from the clock mechanism and crashed onto the floor. Leonid wasn't even 50 years old when he died, and as for what happened to the cuckoo clock after that, I never found out. Have you ever wondered why older people tend to be far more superstitious than the younger generation? I think the reason is simple: life experience. The longer you live, the more you begin to understand that not everything in this world obeys clear rules or scientific explanations. Over the years, I've personally witnessed quite a few strange things myself. Here's one example. When I was a curious kid, my brothers, sisters and I loved digging through the drawers and cabinets belonging to Uncle Vasya. Well, technically, he wasn't really our uncle. He was my grandmother's brother, so I suppose it would be more accurate to call him Grandpa Vasya. His life had not been an easy one. When Vasya was about 18, he worked as a miner. One day, the mine collapsed and buried him underground. Miraculously, he survived, but he was left disabled for the rest of his life. In the large family apartment, he had his own room, and inside that room, he had created a little world of his own. It was filled with old objects, antiques, strange trinkets. For us kids, it was endlessly fascinating to examine them. Many of those items had their own stories, and although Vasya wasn't very talkative, he sometimes shared them after being bombarded with endless questions from a group of curious children. One day, deep inside a drawer of his old dresser, which was usually locked with a small key, I discovered something interesting. An ancient cross. It had turned green with age and hung on a simple cord. The cross itself was large, about 2.5 by 1.5 inches. The metal looked like silver, but with a faint yellowish tint. It was obvious the cross had been worn for many years. The image on the front had almost completely worn away. The edges were uneven and decorated with a strange ornate pattern, something like the crosses used by old believers. I don't remember now whether Uncle Vasya gave me the cross or whether I quietly took it myself. But one way or another, the old artifact moved from the dark dresser into my treasured boyhood box, filled with pocket knives, the compass, toy pistol caps, and other extremely important items. Eventually, I forgot about the cross completely. Years later, after finishing my military service, I came across it again among old junk. For fun, I attached a long silver chain and started wearing it around my neck, just as a curiosity. At first, I didn't pay attention to the fact that the bright silver chain turned black almost immediately. Not until strange things began happening. First, I started losing valuable items, which was unusual for me. I was never a forgetful person. But somehow, one after another, several things disappeared. A branded English automatic umbrella, a custom-made combat knife with a carved mother-of-pearl handle, a new mohair scarf, and several other expensive items. Then my Japanese Sony cassette player suddenly fell off the desk and cracked on the floor. It had been a gift from a relative who worked as a sailor. After that, things got even worse. During the final entrance exam at the university preparatory courses, my geography teacher completely failed me, and completely unfairly. This happened after I had passed higher mathematics, economics, English, and every other subject with excellent grades. And there was no time left for a retake because it would have taken place in another city. A whole year of evening study after work, often until midnight, was about to go to waste. I was furious. In a burst of anger, I told the geography teacher to go to places that couldn't be found on any map, threw my student record book onto the desk, and stormed out. Luckily, the course supervisor, an elderly woman named Rita Solomonovna, stopped me. After calming down, I swallowed my pride, bought some modest but sweet gifts, and returned to the teacher. Thanks to Rita Solomonovna's diplomacy, the problem was eventually resolved. I received the passing grade. But it cost me quite a bit of nerves, and that still wasn't the end of it. Just a couple days later, another problem occurred. One evening, my friend and I were simply walking down the street when we ran into a group of hooligans. We got into a fight and ended up with such black eyes and bruises that we avoided going outside for 2 weeks so we wouldn't scare people. At that point, I started noticing something strange. There seemed to be a suspicious connection between the ancient cross I was wearing and the string of disasters happening around me. The thing was, I didn't wear the cross every day. But every time something bad happened, I was wearing it. At that time, I didn't believe in God or the devil. Still, I took the cross off and put it away, just in case. And almost immediately, everything in my life improved. I entered the university, got a good job, met the woman I loved, got married. Life moved forward. Years passed, and the strange black streak connected with that cross was slowly forgotten. Until one day, for reasons I still don't understand, I decided to wear it again. Maybe I just wanted to show it off at a party. It was a very unusual cross, after all, and I was still young and foolish. The punishment came quickly. That same evening, I slipped on the wet bathroom floor. At that moment, I happened to be holding a razor blade in my hand. During the fall, I almost sliced open my entire leg. Blood covered the entire bathroom floor. I spent 3 weeks on sick leave recovering. After that, I never experimented with the cross again. But I didn't throw it away either. I hung it quietly in the far corner of the room on the same silver chain. Once I told a friend about the strange events connected to the cross. Half joking, I didn't fully believe in its sinister power myself. Deep down, I thought it was probably just a chain of unlucky coincidences. My friend Valera laughed and offered to wear the cursed cross for a few days as a bet. The prize was a bottle of Moldovan cognac called Doina. We shook hands. The next day, Valera returned the cross to me. He looked like a thundercloud, and of course, I kept the bottle of cognac. Apparently, Valera had made a serious mistake at work that same day and was immediately fired. Probably just a coincidence. But he was angry at me for quite a while afterward. Other friends who knew about the story refused to try the experiment. Until about 4 years ago, when another acquaintance named Sasha decided to take the bet. This time, the prize was a bottle of whiskey. I thought he'd probably just run into some minor trouble, but unfortunately, I was wrong. 3 days later, Sasha called me from the urology department of a hospital. He had just undergone surgery. A large kidney stone had started moving and got stuck. Fortunately, the doctors managed to operate in time, but Sasha insisted it was actually lucky. He said the stone had been bothering him for years, and now he was finally rid of it. The fact that he could have died without medical help didn't convince him otherwise. Stubborn as a mule. To prove the cross had nothing to do with it, as soon as he left the hospital, he put it on again. We agreed he would return it in a week and claim his bottle of whiskey. But I didn't have to wait a week. 2 days later, Sasha called again, this time from the trauma department. He had fallen asleep while driving his Toyota Corolla on a night highway and flew off the road into a deep forest ditch. Luckily, he was alone in the car and didn't hurt anyone else, but he seriously injured himself and completely destroyed his car. Since then, for the past 4 years, I haven't touched Uncle Vasia's cross, and I don't let anyone else wear it either. Why tempt fate? It still hangs quietly in the corner, on that same silver chain.